Call to order the April 9th regular business meeting of City Council. Mr. Hamp, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Just to remind folks in attendance that if they wish to speak during the citizen comment period, that they must sign up to do so in the back of the council chambers. The first item on business is the consideration of the consent agenda. I would ask that if we could pull off item 2A. So with that sort of the approval of the minutes. And with that, is there any discussion relative to that? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Relative to 2A, I just wanted to make a couple of notations. I went back and watched the video specifically to the comprehensive plan discussion, and would ask that I think some of the nuances of the discussion as it related to implications of cost of the comprehensive plan were not entirely accurately reflected. I think if we could maybe ask the clerk to maybe kind of go back, review 1 hour, 0.22 minutes on the video to expound upon the conversation as it related to the work of the working group, and that there was no one's expectation that we would be able to accomplish all of it all at once, and that the cost would be of a magnitude that we would rely solely on real estate revenue to do so. So I don't know, do we want to wait for those changes before we would amend?
I would think so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for indulging me, folks. I appreciate it. Okay, matters from city council members. Anything anyone would like to share this evening? Okay, we'll move on to item 4, the proclamation of April as Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month in the city of Waynesboro. Mr. Hamp.
Sure. Vice Mayor Short and members of council, safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential for children and families to thrive. And child abuse and neglect are in fact preventable through programs and services that support children and healthy families. April is National Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month, and this evening the City Council joins the nation and proclaiming April as Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month in Waynesboro. And in doing so, the council joins and supports agencies such as the Office on Youth, our Department of Social Services, and various other organizations such as the Exchange Club and the Waynesboro Women's Club, bringing attention to and energy to the campaign to prevent child abuse and neglect. This year's theme is Building Brighter Childhoods. And this evening, Ms. Meredith Keppel and Ms. Lisa Dunn. Ms. Keppel is from the Office on Youth, and Ms. Lisa Dunn is from the Shenandoah Valley Department of Social Services. Both regional programs, I might add. The two ladies are here to receive the proclamation from council and provide some additional information about child abuse and neglect prevention. Ms. Dunn and Ms. Keppel.
Good evening, and thank you. Currently, just a few statistics. There are about 156 children that are in childcare or in foster care in the Stanton, Waynesboro, and Augusta area. 29 just in Waynesboro alone. This does not include children who maybe or have been placed with family members that we're unaware of due to abuse and neglect in their homes. We've also provided you all with some other statistics and information about the state overall of child abuse and what some children may encounter over time.
Ms. Dunn, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just to say thank you for recognizing this month for us and that support.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
So if you ladies would come forward and receive the proclamation.
Thank you all so much for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Item 5 is a proclamation for the Friends of the Library. This presentation of a proclamation acknowledging the Friends of the Library, Public Library. Mr. Hamp.
So, Vice Mayor Short and members of council, if you know the Friends of the Waynesboro Public Library, you know that they're pretty terrific people, and this proclamation acknowledges and expresses appreciation for the varied and essential support that the Friends provide our public library. And through the years, they've demonstrated support in various means by providing contributions of in-kind materials and supply and support, prizes and incentives and programs, prizes and incentives for various programs, program materials and supplies, financial gifts, volunteerism, advocacy, and general promotion. It may be informative for you to know that the Friends were founded in 1966, and through the decades, the support of the Friends is evident in the library, and recognizing that the Friends contribute to the vitality and reputation of Waynesboro's public library. It's appropriate this evening that we're recognizing the Friends in that it is National Library Week, which celebrates and recognizes the importance of public libraries as institutions in our nation and the contributions of individuals who work and volunteer in public libraries make to learning and recreation and just general knowledge acquisition.
Great.
This evening, I think Mr. Kevin Ryan, whom I believe is the president of the Friends, is here to receive the proclamation.
Well, the agenda does say present the proclamation to Kevin Ryan, president, so I guess I must be Kevin Ryan, president of the Friends. And in that capacity, I'm pleased to accept the proclamation on behalf of the 450 plus or minus dues-paying members and donors to the Friends. Some members of the Friends Board of Directors are here tonight. If you could raise your hand on the wave to the crowd. You have just recognized in this proclamation, I think it's the 5th whereas clause, that the library is a cornerstone of our community, and we agree. Indeed, we all can be proud of the library. It serves the community well, and it enjoys an excellent reputation within the state of Virginia and beyond. I'm glad you mentioned that we were founded in 1966 because we're pleased that our 50-plus years of support for the library has helped to make it what it is today. And we're gratified to be working with Zahir Mahmood, library director, and his staff, as well as the library board of trustees headed by Lowell Lemons, and we have a few trustees here today. Raise your hand, wave to the crowd. So we thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So I'll note also that included in your packet is a membership application to the Friends of the Library.
Very good. It's a bargain.
It is.
Thank you all so much. I'll get my steps in tonight, so I appreciate y'all coming out and all that you do. And I know I speak for the rest of the council in this regard that we have the best library in the state of Virginia, and it's largely in great support for your organization. So very much appreciate all that you do. Anybody else? Okay. Number 6 is a presentation of the Shenandoah Valley Social Services Annual Report. Mr. Hamp.
This evening, Ms. Anita Harris, who is the director, and Ms. Lisa Dunn is the assistant director. These ladies will present the report. So please come forward and make your presentation. It is. Did you bring the presentation and load? No, it's not a budget presentation. It's the DSS annual report. So why don't we
Is
just
that
work
your?
on?
Here we go. Oh,
Okay.
thank goodness for backup. Welcome. Thank you very much for having us, Vice Mayor and council members. I am Anita Harris, like Mr. Hamp, the city manager, said, and Lisa Dunn, my assistant director. Very pleased to be here. This is the first time I've been here in front of you, and it's very nice to be here to present our annual report.
Thank you.
And as soon as we get our technology up, there we go. Okay. And this is our fiscal year for 2016 to 2017. And we have been providing assistance to the local citizens in need since 1914. We know it has been since 1914 because we found an old scrapbook in an old desk drawer that was locked. And in that scrapbook, went back to 1914. It had newspaper clippings and articles from that time period up through the 20s, the Depression, World War I, World War II, and actually the late 50s. So it had some really neat articles and pictures, which we'll include in here in this presentation. So actually, the protection and welfare of individuals in need in our localities has been documented, like I said, in local newspapers for many years. And we were called the Community Welfare League, which was created in 1914. After that, we were the Stanton Augusta Social Services and the Waynesboro Social Services. Consolidation in 2003 of the two departments was created, and we became the Shenandoah Valley Social Services. Presently, we have about 149 staff. Actually, Mrs. W.W. King was appointed as the executive secretary for the Community Welfare League, and assistance was given by two paid staff. One was a visiting nurse, and the other was an investigator social worker. All the other work was conducted by volunteers. So as an example of the budget that they had, in July 1914 to July 1915, there was a total of $1,143.16 for the budget. Groceries for the year that they spent for community members, about $232. Cold and wood, fuel assistance, $143. The visiting nurse and supplies, $516. The investigator social worker salary, $188. And of course, charter fees and miscellaneous expenses. So quite a difference in that time period than what it is today. But we are providing some of the same things. We have SNAP, which is food assistance, which is groceries. We have fuel assistance, which is cold and wood. So we are doing some of the same things. We still have investigators and social workers. TANF is our temporary assistance to needy families. This is what you think of as the welfare check. It provides monetary assistance to children and their families in need. They must have minor children to get this benefit and be eligible, income eligible. We've received over 1,000 applications this past year. We have 384 ongoing cases monthly. And of course, you can see it was over $1 million benefits issued. Diversionary cases are cases where we basically don't take them on the TANF rolls. They have cutoff notices or rent payments, something that's a crisis for them, and we actually help them this one time, and for about a year they cannot be on our TANF rolls. It's to try to keep them from actually having TANF monthly, just help them with that assistance. Our SNAP program, that's one of our biggest. It's our second biggest program. Medicaid is our first one. And SNAP is our supplemental nutrition assistance for low-income families. So we had over 4,000 applications this past year. The average cases that we serve per month, 5,471. So $15 million in benefits. So like I said, that's a huge program. Our Medicaid is our largest program. We have families and children, and we also serve long-term care, aged and blind and disabled. Between the two of those populations, we have over 10,000 cases. And as you can see, a huge amount of benefits. General relief, this is for children that are for
families that are taking care of children that are unrelated. Basically, we have 8 children and $23,000 spent this past year. This is where a neighbor takes in a child that basically the family has separated or something, and instead of the child going into foster care, then a neighbor decides, oh, I'm going to take this child. He goes to school with my children. I'm going to take him in, and they can get some monthly assistance. We have burial assistance, which is a local funding. We had 54 burial applications last year, and like over $26,000 in local burial expense. This is cremation. We basically give $500 toward the burial, and the burial cannot exceed $1,500. So the family has to come up with $1,000, and we do $500. And we have arrangements with the funeral homes locally to do this. So it's very good that we do have this, because that's a very low amount for a burial, even cremation. Our energy assistance program, we provide heating, cooling, and crisis assistance to low-income households. Over 3,000 applications, fuel applications processed this past year, almost $1 million in fuel benefits. We have cooling applications, almost 1,653 in cooling benefits, as you can see there. So this is a big program too for us. Our daycare services, we provide quality daycare services for children. Monthly average number, 169. This is for families that are low income, that are working, or they're going to school, or they're in our VIEW program that are trying to get employment. And our VIEW program that assists, trains, and prepares TANF recipients for employment, we have 120 monthly. The ones that are employed, a monthly average of 55, and their hourly wage is over the minimum, $9.21, so that's good. And basically, to be in our VIEW program, they have to be TANF eligible, and they have to participate in the VIEW program to be employed. To be self-sufficient, that we need to get them employed. And so if they're not actively participating in our VIEW program, then their TANF check can be sanctioned. We have fraud referrals and collections that we go after, and as you can see, we had 142,671 total collections this past year. We actually do not get to keep that money. We have to send it back to the state, but it does help us with our fraud unit. We have 2 investigators and a clerical person. And I think we had over 20-some cases that went to the Commonwealth's attorney for prosecution this past year. Okay.
I want to take you through some of our services programs now and just hit the highlights of our numbers in these programs. First, we have our Adult Protective Services Program, and this is our investigations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of the elderly, disabled, and incapacitated adults. Our numbers of intake referrals went down slightly this past year. However, the number of investigations that we actually, and that means the severity of those referrals, was higher. And so we actually investigated 1,200 of that 1,900, which is a higher number. Our Adult Protective Services, our workers are actually located in our Waynesboro office here, and they have the highest number of referrals in the state. And that is not to say that we have more abuse and neglect in our region, but we do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of work educating the public on what that means, how to recognize abuse and neglect, and so we get a lot of referrals. And a lot of those referrals are just seeking information, so we record those all. Our AP, we also have a services unit that once the investigation is complete, they may need more services, and so we carry that caseload. And also for families or adults that need guardianships, meaning they are incapacitated and need a guardian, we look over those cases as well. We also have a volunteer payee program, and we have 38 participating in this program, and that is an area where our agency always needs volunteers, and this is where a volunteer acts as the person who's paying those monthly bills for that elderly person so that they can maintain their homes and maintain the food they need and those basics so they can stay in their home longer. So that's a great program that we offer through our agency. It's unique. Child Protective Services is our next program, and here we have seen a significant increase in the number of Child Protective Services referrals over the prior year, as well as an increase in our CPS actual investigations and family assessments. So we have continued to see increases there. In addition, we also, whenever a family is in need of services, after that investigation or family assessment is through, we are able to refer to ongoing services and keep those cases open longer to continue to prevent any abuse and neglect. We had a significant increase in this area from 50 some cases last year to 71. And then we also carry a caseload of prevention cases, and these are typically cases that are before the court, those CHINS cases or those where the judge has joined our department as a party, and we try to prevent their coming into foster care. Okay. And then we have foster care and adoption. These numbers, as Meredith presented earlier, are a little higher currently with the number of children we had in foster care over the previous year. Our average caseload was 148, with about 49 children entering foster care that year. But we also had 42 adoptions in that previous year, which is a significant increase over the year prior to that, which was around 26 or 27. So we have had a great focus on that, and we have been real happy to be able to find permanency for those children that are in foster care. We also carry post-adoption. So once the child is adopted, we carry a caseload of about 252 children that we continue to provide support for. And we only have about 55 foster homes, which actually for an agency our size is pretty good. But this is another area where we are always in need, and we always have training multiple times a year to get our new foster parents ready. This program is the Children's Services Act. It's called CSA. This is not a DSS program, but our localities have chosen our Department of Social Services to administer this program for us. This is a program that brings together money from various child-serving agencies into one pool, and we access that money through coming together through teams. So our family assessment and planning team and our community policy and management team come together to discuss and plan for these children. The number of youth served total was 442, and the total dollars spent in this program was right under $10 million. So it's a very expensive program, but it provides for children who are at risk of coming into care and for children who are already in foster care. And our largest expenditure in Waynesboro for the city is from our schools for private day placements, with our second largest number being for children who are in what's called therapeutic foster care. So if you saw on our last slide, we have 55 homes and 150-some children in foster care. We don't have foster homes locally for all those children, so we have to reach out to what we call therapeutic foster care agencies to help provide services for those children. Okay. All right, this is a pie chart kind of showing you the breakdown. This is how we decide we look at our caseload numbers for each locality, and this is the percentage of local money that each locality spends. So as you can see, Waynesboro is at 26.5, Stanton 25.9, and Augusta County, of course, has the largest share. And really those percentages, when you break it down, whether it's CSA programming, whether it's the number of children in foster care, those percentages match throughout. So, all right. What did?
And so, more than 100 years later, the goals of the Community Welfare League closely resemble what our current goals are at Shenandoah Valley Social Services. Of the Community Welfare League, we had to relieve the poor and needy,
And for our agency, we're creating an environment for people to become and remain self-sufficient,
to help, to self-help,
and to increase community ability to assume greater ownership and responsibility for human services.
to minister to the sick and suffering,
And today we are protecting citizens at risk in at-risk situations from neglect, abuse, and exploitation,
to encourage school attendance,
and to promote conditions that support development of healthy families and individuals,
to improve social and moral conditions,
and improve flexibility, innovation, accountability, effectiveness, professional development, and cultural diversity in the social services program.
and to aid in every possible way.
So our goals from 1914 to now are very similar, a little shorter back then, which is actually not a bad idea.
So our mission, as far as, is the promotion of self-reliance and protection of citizens through community-based services. And regardless of whether the story was written 100 years ago or presently, social services workers put their heart and souls into the work that they do in the community and helping to serve the community as well and as best as they can. So, thank you very much. Is there any questions that we could answer?
Any questions?
Are y'all funded by CAPSAW?
No, sir. No, we don't get any CAPSAW money. Our monies are federal, state, and local.
Any other questions? Again, thank you all for all that you do and
thank you.
supporting the region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. Very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you having us here.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pleasure. All right, number 7 on the agenda this evening is the appropriation ordinance, general fund, to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $8,000 from the general fund's unassigned fund balance to replenish the undesignated operating contingency in the FY18 FY18 in the general fund. Mr. Ham.
So, Vice Mayor Short and members of the council, this is appropriation replenishing the contingency, operating contingency for the current fiscal year. The deficiency arises from expenditures that have been applied to the city's efforts to secure a favorable position with respect to the NERDA settlement. And there are, I'm a little concerned about the ability to weather the final quarter of this operating year with the contingency being what it is. Having not pre-budgeted or pre-programmed or otherwise provided for the expenses related to environmental assessment, legal review on a couple of matters, and some, I wouldn't call them marketing, but program illustration materials. Those charges were applied to the manager's contingency, and I'd like to have a little bit of money to finish the year with, please.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Okay, all ordinances introduced this evening will be considered at the council's April 23rd regular meeting. Number 8 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $30,000 from the Governmental Facilities Reserve to the Parks and Recreation operating budget for the installation of an HVAC system for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Mr. Ham.
So, members of council, you may be aware that the Rosenwald building is heated through a system of steam pipes that are embedded in concrete floors at the Rosenwald building. The building is getting significant age on it, and when those pipes crack and fail, steam bleeds into the building and it diminishes the ability to heat the building. Because the pipes are becoming increasingly fragile over time, jackhammering the floor and spot repairing the leak, if you can identify where the crack is, tends to create larger and more additional problems down the line. So what the staff has done in these occasions is convert the steam pipe system into a more traditional HVA system that furnishes heat and cooling. And this will do about a third of the first floor. We've done this either by necessity or preference in several other sections in the building as well.
Awesome. Are there any questions? Okay, is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Item 9 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $25,000 in Project Hope grant funds to the school funds for tutoring and support services for homeless students for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Mr. Ham.
As the ordinance indicates, these are grant funds.
Any questions? Motion to introduce?
So moved.
Mr. Freeman, thank you. Number 10 is communication, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Ham.
So I have one item this evening. A member of council requested just a status report on work being applied to code enforcement, which was identified as a priority last year, and funds were furnished in the budget to apply a greater emphasis, programmatic and service emphasis in that area for the benefit of the community. Ms. Michelson will speak about some code amendments that were necessary following my remarks. So a couple of things that we're needing to take a closer look at the city's code. You'll see that a number of sections have not been touched, and we run into particular challenge and are working with Ms. Michelson to correct some authorization and ability for our staff to remove inoperable or abandoned vehicles that are located on private property. There is some consideration with respect to notice to lien holders and ultimate disposition of that property once we take possession, that our code was deficient, and Ms. Michelson is helping us in that regard. As practical matters, our staff is working to develop how we work collaboratively across agencies to effect the removal of property. You can imagine that when it gets to the point of abating a nuisance and involving removal of somebody's private property from their property, we think it's best if we have an individual that has a badge and a firearm present to oversee that exercise. And so we're working with the chief of police to understand what capacity his department can deliver, and we think that key to their support to that initiative are understanding that it's his support will not be unlimited, but it will be substantial provided that the code enforcement staff can plan and communicate in advance how much and where the vehicles are located. So that's a programmatic element that our staff is attending to, that once the code changes are adopted, will position us to be more effective in that area. A remaining consideration, however, is where we store inoperable vehicles once we take possession. An alternative that we're investigating is simply outsourcing removal and disposition. And so our purchasing department is working to develop an RFP whereby storage and disposal becomes the responsibility of a private vendor. And so that's, if we can work out the logistics and legalities of that mechanism of service delivery, that's where we're headed in that regard. We'll turn next to additional articles in Chapter 38, but that's sort of the major developments in our progress to strengthen a program in that area. And again, we're focused primarily on inoperative and abandoned vehicles, and we think that that will be a significant step to improving the environment, the safety, and the aesthetic of our community. If I could get Melissa to talk a little bit now about code.
Vice Mayor Short, council members, Mr. Hamp, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Homberrier, and Chief Wilhelm and I met to discuss areas of the city's code on inoperable and abandoned vehicles that could be amended and updated to be more streamlined, to be more effective, and to come into conformity and compatibility with the Virginia State Code. And we identified some areas that the city was looking to do in those areas. Mainly inoperable vehicles is what we took our first stab at, and I updated a lot of the definitions. We had fallen kind of behind in some of our definitions. We amended the city's code, or the proposed amendments to the Virginia code allows localities to limit the number of vehicles that are outside of a building but are still shielded or protected from view. So even though they are shielded and or screened, the locality can still limit it. So we chatted about that and what would the number be, and should we have the number be 1? So to sort of curb the problem that we see, formulating now, we updated the notice requirements. There's a distinguishment in the Virginia Code on the notice required to the real property owner versus the vehicle owner. It's the real property owner that is really in violation of the code. They're allowing these inoperable vehicles to be on their property, even if they don't own the vehicle. And the vehicle owner, if it's different than the property owner, doesn't really come into play if and until the inoperable vehicle is not removed by the property owner, but is instead removed by the city, and then they want to redeem their property back, and the proper notice needs to go to the vehicle owner and to any lien holders. So we updated those notices, and we modified the appeal process and streamlined that, and as well as proposing changing the penalties from a criminal nature to just a civil penalty, in line with, again, what Virginia Code. And I think it's more effective, potentially, with enforcing these types of provisions. We also looked at the abandoned vehicles, and that one wasn't as far afield, if you will, from the Virginia State Code. So we just deleted a lot of duplications and inconsistencies between inoperable vehicles and abandoned vehicles that, again, if they're written sort of independently of each other, over time, I guess some inconsistencies had appeared, and we're trying to take a global view of, in fact, as Mr. Hamp touched upon, all of Article 38, which includes some other provisions that sort of overlap, but we want to make sure we don't have any inconsistencies or duplicative efforts. So now we've got the sort of amended, that portion of the City Code amendments prepared to bring to City Council for approval and adoption. And we're also looking, again, down the road, I will, not to alarm anybody, but as I have done projects for the city, looking at various portions of the City Code, there's probably other areas that, or even on a whole, that there's significant areas of the City Code that hasn't been updated in a long time, and it's probably fallen out of compliance or comport with Virginia State Code.
Great. So I think we'll have some of those amendments coming to council in probably the next several meetings.
Great. Thank you for that. Any questions?
Can you give us an idea now how long it would take, once we notice a situation is in violation, it might take to get taken care of? Is there some kind of general?
That's a great question.
It will take, I can't, because it will depend on each individual case, and it will depend on how rapidly we ramp up in the number of cases that we're managing. I think the message has been pretty clear to the staff that this is an area of emphasis, but I'm just not quite in a position to say yes, that within every case, once we're notified, it'll be 4 days for notice and then an additional 2 weeks for compliance, and then by day 21 or 28, you'll see us taking action. It's just a little too early for us to forecast how quickly that will occur.
I think you said something about amended or revised some of the definitions of, I guess, abandoned, or can you give us any idea of what that was and what is proposed now?
Mainly in the area of what protected from view, what the definition of how you can shield or screen a vehicle from view of the public, and be in comport with the statute. Virginia Code specifically defines what shielded from view or protected or screened from view is, and the city's code was not matching the Virginia Code definition, and that was one of the particular areas, because there's been a lot of when real property owners dispute the violation, that is an area that has gained some, case law as to what is screened, what is shielded from view, what does that mean? If we have a tarp over it, or if I just have some trees planted or some bushes. So our city code had not kept up to date with those cases and that kind of definitional progression.
Thank
Another question? Thank you. Thank you for the update.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, number 11 is citizen comment period. Do we have any?
So, Ms. Judy Walden.
Good
Get your
evening,
name
Vice
and-
Mayor and council members
Wallen?
and others.
We can
Yeah.
get your name and
I'm
address, and I'm sorry, we can
I'm
get your
sorry.
name and address.
Judy Walden, and I'm at 204 Brandon Circle here in Waynesboro.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you all for recognizing the Child Abuse Prevention Month. But I'd also like to let you know about Thank a Youth Worker Day, which is on May the 10th. I volunteer for the Office on Youth, but there's so many other organizations that do help our youth, either as staff or as volunteers. And if you know of anyone who is a youth worker, could be Boys and Girls Club, could be our youth over here for Protective Services, the CASA, the Valley Children's Advocacy Center, YMCA, coaches. Please let them know that we appreciate how much they do for our youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Tom McDonald, and I can make this a little easier. Mr. McDonald resides at 1117 Cove Road.
Correct.
Club Road.
Road, yeah. Yeah, you made it easier. Thanks for noticing. Donald, how are you?
I wasn't known for my membership. Anyway, good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. I'm sure everyone here appreciates all your hard work in prioritizing and preparing the city budget. And I realize it's no easy task to get this accomplishment completed and splitting up the pie, if you will, as to how our money is appropriated, trying to satisfy as many needs of all citizens as possible while staying within the monetary boundaries. Bar graph that Mr. Shaw put up on the screen for all us to see showed that the allocated budget for education came to approximately $16 million, which is by far the biggest chunk of the pie. The second largest piece of the proverbial pie is public safety at approximately $10 million, which must cover the police, fire, EMT expenses, and, among other things, relating to protecting and serving the safety and security of all. Police Chief Wilhelm, Fire Chief Bradley, Mr. Kreitzer, and Sheriff Harris are great administrators and utilize the best of their ability all the well-trained and professional people in their divisions, of which we are blessed to have such good employees. I do realize that we're bound to provide a proper education for all students of our city, utilizing the allocated funds in the best way possible. However, we also are bound to do the absolutely best we can to keep all our citizens and visitors of our great city safe and secure, not only in their homes, but also in schools, businesses, churches, restaurants, etc., and on the streets. I'm asking that you council members take one more in-depth look at the budget allocations and possibly shift a little bit more of the piece of the pie to public safety. Though a proper and well-equipped school system is a large part in making a great community, we must also realize and absorb the fact that in order to achieve the goal of a great city, we must also start off with a safe city. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
That's it, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Which carries. Thank you.
Yeah.